I've been playing JRPGs since the time of Christ and his disciples, and though I've come to absolutely love the genre, nothing is perfect. Well, maybe Sir Valenstein, but otherwise, nothing else. Over the years, I've noticed a great many sins committed within the genre, whether they be little things that become a source of consistent irritation within a game, or big things that absolutely kill a game for me. What follows are my JRPG pet peeves as requested by Patreon. But remember, this isn't me saying every RPG is bad for this, and it isn't just JRPGs that are bad for these things either. It's just in JRPGs that I typically tend to notice and feel these things in effect. You guys all know that I love the genre, but these are some things that I think it could do well to avoid. Let's start with something simple. Games that don't share experience to non-active party members I find to be mostly excusable, but some games like this force you into tight and almost completely unfair situations from time to time when they commit the grave sin of forcing you to use party members who are woefully underleveled. This can lead to a number of huge issues. If the game is designed so that enemies level up with you, you basically have to level grind your characters against really tough enemies. Keeping them alive to gain XP at the end of battle often means making sure that they don't get hit at all, and sometimes that's just not that possible. Things get even worse if you're working off a save that has you locked to immediately starting a boss battle with these characters with no way out. If you do have a way out, that just ends up leading to another pet peeve of mine, which JRPGs are infamous for: the grind. Now, I get it. Some of you love the grind. Dungeon crawlers and some tactics games are basically built around the idea that grinding is desirable. I'll be honest, 9 times out of 10, I absolutely hate grinding. Somebody once described hell as repetition, and to me, that's all grinding is. Fighting these same enemies over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and you get the point. Sure, you can argue there's a character stat progression that might feel rewarding to work up, but I'd rather get that reward in any other way. I typically prefer when games reward my skill, and not when they reward how much patience I can force myself to have. Unless it's Monster Hunter or Dark Souls, of course. Grinding is never a necessity in those games, but it sure is fun. Now, sometimes games will pull a fast one on you and make you feel like grinding is the answer, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes a boss strategy requires something so specific that the boss cannot be beaten unless you have the right party member, the right weapon, or the right item. Strategies in bosses are fine, but when the strategies are hyper-specific or impossible without this specific strategy, it gets a bit extra. What can really drive this over the edge, though, is if the game lets you start a battle with a build that literally makes it impossible and will inevitably enforce you to load an old save. If a battle is this specific, I think they should either not let you start it until you have what you need, or upon losing, meet the player with a small cutscene explaining or at least hinting at what went wrong. Make the characters run away with 1 HP if you have to, but for the love of God, don't make it all a complete waste of time and boot us back to an old save without teaching us anything in the process. It just makes it all feel like you're being punished unfairly. And in keeping with bosses as a topic, bosses that self-destruct without warning at the end of a fight. Just stop this one. At the very least, give us a countdown or make a character tell us something's going to happen. When I play RPGs, I'm a hoarder. I like to not use healing items for as long as possible. Sometimes I'll just keep attacking, even if I should heal, just to see how long I can make it. I especially don't like to heal if I think I'm about to win a battle, level up, and get my HP back anyway. In a way, this kind of makes how much I suffer from this one my own fault. But I really don't believe self-destruct bosses should come without warning regardless. And though I haven't come across this one too many times, instant death attacks that can target your whole party. Even though these usually have something like a 1 in 3 chance of killing a party member, I still find this completely inexcusable. This basically means RNG can kill you at an unlucky whim, regardless of how well you've been playing. This essentially makes all of your skill and strategy completely useless. Granted, most games have something to the effect of anti-death talismans, but you won't know you need them until you are already in a battle, and by then, it may be too late. Petrification is a rough one as well. Not in general as a status ailment, in that regard it's fine. But the first time petrification is introduced in many games, it's at a random boss battle, and I'm almost personally never equipped to deal with it. Again, I'm a hoarder. This doesn't just mean that I hoard the items I collect, but the money too. I only buy what I need. I will stock up on basics like potions and poison heals, but in almost every RPG, you know that you won't need anti-petrification for a long time. so I never buy it. But then I always hit that one boss who gradually petrifies my party members until I hit game over, forcing me to backtrack all the way out of the dungeon, back a town or two, and stock up on curatives. Curatives that I'll likely only need for one more battle before beating the game. So how are we doing so far, folks? Is it seeming like I hate my favorite genre yet? Cause I promise I don't. How many of these are seeming to you like they might just be recurring nitpicks, or problems that I largely bring on myself? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, we still got a few more pet peeves to get through before I'm done talking crap about the things that I love. One thing that's thankfully being addressed in games more often now, but is still seen in many modern titles like Octopath Traveler for example, is battles that take forever and grant no experience. Sometimes you're required to backtrack to really early areas, and random encounters will guarantee you'll be fighting really low level enemies while doing so. Sometimes the way a game balances its stats still makes these enemies take a while to kill. Sure, not as long as they used to, and maybe they can't even hurt you anymore, but given the 1 experience point you'll likely get for suffering through the battle, any amount of time spent on this is more than I'd like to give it. Something else that irritates me is infinite undiscovery and black flies. Often I have a hard time telling them apart. I also find, at least with action RPGs, sometimes the world chatter is just too damn repetitive. We all remember "Think You Can Take Me"
Think you can take me?
and "Don't Forget Me."
Don't forget me! Don't forget me! Don't forget me! Don't forget me!
But Xenoblade Chronicles 2 isn't the only game to suffer from this.
Did you treat them?
It's a goth. Soaked to the bone.
I find as well many games just have poor economic systems where speccing your entire team is a near impossibility without grinding for cash. This one doesn't bother me too much as I'm stingy and generally only like to equip the people I plan on using. But when a game constantly forces you to use everybody, and the weapons do make a huge difference, you can miss me with that one. This is where you start the whole process of digging through your inventory and seeing what you do and don't need, so that you can sell as much as possible in hopes of buying new weapons, and this always leads to problems, especially if you're like me and decide to sell things like your petrification curatives. And lastly, I want to go over the issues I generally find in the later portions of JRPGs leading up to the ending. Because holy crap, I love the genre, but the endings are typically filled with issues and annoyances. Let's start with a simple one. Forced or contrived revisit every area quests. Sure, it can be cool to see everything again one last time, but usually this is literally for no purpose other than to go there and waste time, and it shows. NPCs usually still say the same crap, and the world feels exactly as it did before, and you just get this sinking feeling that your adventure is actually far less consequential to the world than you've been led to believe. It's even worse if you have to go through old dungeons because some guy decided to finally give you some key or something that opens the locked doors at the back of every boss room. It gets double bad points if you have to refight the old bosses while doing so. And what do you usually have to do all this for? Likely because some powerful weapon that was never talked about before was split into 7 pieces and thrown in these areas, and just nobody ever found it. It's padding more often than not, and the same can be said for my next recurring issue. Final dungeons almost always overstay their welcome. I get wanting a bigger or longer final dungeon, and I think that's a fine thing to want. But where most dungeons in RPGs play out like a story told in 2 acts, the final dungeons typically stretch out to 4 or 6, and it's just too much. 3 would be plenty. But even that said, when you're at the end, you're already hyped up. You want to get to that final boss and kill him, and you want it to feel awesome. We don't get more hyped up by delaying that gratification to annoying degrees. It's not the length of the final dungeon that should be impressive.
That's what she said?
It's the events that are contained within it that should be the crazy part, and of course, the bosses. It's okay to keep a dungeon on a more normal scale. This issue only gets made worse if the ending builds up to the typical friendship is magic scenario seen throughout many JRPGs. Sure, friendship is great and all, but damn if it doesn't forgive somebody trying to destroy the world. It's okay for a world to have consequences. In fact, I'd prefer it. Now typically I can turn a blind eye to this if the execution is good. But if the execution on this cliched theme is poor in any way, it really kills the ending for me and can easily leave a sour taste in my mouth upon completing a game. But not as sour as a game where the ending, not the true ending, is locked behind excessively obscure requirements. Even if it is a true ending though, too much obscurity is never a good thing. I don't mind true endings in general, but sometimes they actually unwrite the better ending. Sometimes they unwrite the better ending for the friendship is magic garbage. Or sometimes a true ending might only add 2 lines of dialogue and feel like a total waste of time to get. A lot of the times now, true endings have way too much emphasis put on them by players. But I digress. Forced revisiting of the entire world, dungeons overstaying their welcomes, friendship is magic conclusions that are devoid of any consequence, obtuse ending and true ending requirements, and true endings that run the risk of unwriting better endings or otherwise feel like they're just not that rewarding to get. These are problems I run into all the time towards the end of JRPGs. Of course, this was my list of pet peeves. There are some games that commit these sins in ways that make them easy to excuse or understand. Games that I love. The Legend of Heroes series commits a great deal of them. However, other games commit them with very poor execution, and it's just not excusable. Thankfully, it would take far more than this to push me away from the genre. So long as we keep getting Trails and Tales games, I'll be here till the day I die. Or, of course, until I lose my fingers in a freak moose attack, whichever one comes first. And that's where I'm gonna end this one today. If you guys liked the video, let me know in the comment section below, and thank you Patreon for the suggestion. If you really like the content, consider supporting the show on Patreon. Links to all my socials are in the description below, and as always folks, thanks for watching.